thanks for being here. I'm Lisa Coffey at LoopMe, as mentioned. LoopMe is an AI company, an ad tech company that uses AI for real-life business outcomes. I'm excited to be here at our first Brand Innovators Summit, and very excited to be here with Amanda. We spent a lot of time chatting over the last week, connecting, and I think first we can dive into your background and career. One of the things Amanda and I connected on is that I've gone from age-old companies of the Wall Street Journal or Fortune Magazine, Amazon, to an ad tech startup, and Amanda's the opposite. She went from Birchbox and Masonette to a 60-year-old institution of WeightWatchers. Tell us a little bit about really what you brought from the startup world to help growth and development at WeightWatchers.
Yeah, I mean, first thing I'll say is I love the startup space, and I actually wasn't looking for that transition to a bigger company. It was really unexpected, to be honest, that they reached out to me to ask about being the CMO and see if it was fit. And so we'll get into this later, but really why it was a great fit is WeightWatchers is an amazing moment of transformation and change. So what I brought is, what you have to, the first and foremost thing at a startup is appetite for risk-taking, right? Really looking at big changes, what you can do, and being data-informed, insight-informed, but at the end of the day, taking some big jumps and leaps of faith in terms of risk with the business. So for example, one of the first things I did came in was look at our media strategy, look at the LTV to CAC and how we distribute across the year, and shifting, a lot of money out of our peak season of January into other parts of the year, which, from a kind of pure thesis strategy would seem really risky, but we did that because we saw in the data and it ultimately panned out. And then balancing that with real human leadership and transparency as you're taking big risks and leading through change, making sure you're showing up with the team with transparency and showing them that every risk and every guess is not going to hit right, but it's okay. Okay to make mistakes and learn from them.
All right, so talk tonight. Being at a smaller, newer company, what's your advice or one lesson you've learned at WeightWatchers in the last 18 months?
Yeah, something really interesting, kind of related to what I was just saying, is that finding out that thriving in uncertainty can be learned and taught. At a startup, it's one of the first things you hire for. When I would hire talent in a startup, before you screen for your functional expertise, you screen for, do you thrive in uncertainty? Does your blood start pumping when you know that you don't know what the answer is? And that's not necessarily what, the hiring criteria at a larger company. And so bringing everyone along the journey, not just on my team, but across all the WeightWatchers, we've learned that you can teach that. You can teach people to thrive in uncertainty. It's just skills that can be learned. And that really can help people not only in the work we're doing now, but their whole career. I think the whole, the pace of change is so much faster than it has been in every industry. And so thinking about weaving that into the leadership culture in any company, I think would be really important.
One of the areas I focus on is ambiguity, right? Very, very similar, right? Ambiguity, and when you've been in advertising for 20 plus years, and the pace of change in the industry is, people really need to be prepared for that. Nothing's going to stay the same. Cookies are going away. All of that. So I completely align on that as far as what's a good kind of skill set. All right, so let's dig into WeightWatchers and what you're doing at CDS, right? It's kind of like, okay, what's the connection? But Monday night, I saw Brian Cooley from CNET, and he talked a lot about what we're going to see on the floor at CES, very much around smart home, automotive. But the biggest thing he really talked a lot about is healthcare. One of the cool products that's launching this year is a little stethoscope, and you can do your telehealth, and your doctor can listen to your heart and your lungs, and just really talked a lot about the trend of where we're going. So tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing here and what WeightWatchers is doing here, and go from there.
Yeah, well, I need to go check that out. Based on where we're going, that sounds really interesting. But yeah, we're really stepping into the spotlight as a digital health company. And there's two parts of that: the evolution of WeightWatchers and where we're going. One is the digital part, so really kind of the transformation WeightWatchers has gone through, and really spurred by COVID and the pandemic, as many other companies have. That before COVID, majority of members were members of the workshop business, so the kind of physical workshops. The app, we all had an app for a long time, that digital companion, but it was built to be a companion to the workshop experience. With COVID, and then since then, we're over 80% of our members are app only. And so that shift to the app, being a digital product first company, centering the product team and driving the strategy and how that's going to drive outcomes and improvements in health for everyone is a pretty big shift for the business. And so coming to places that celebrate and think about digital innovation, like CES, are really important. And as well, there's been a more recent transformation where we're moving into the concept of weight health. There's a lot of conversation about this happening, where your weight is really is really tied to your overall health and well-being, and it's one of the leading indicators and a part of many of the chronic conditions that kind of plague our society: cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity. And focusing on your weight health is just as critical as focusing on heart health or mental health, if you think about factors that can really improve or detract from your overall health and longevity. And so with that, we acquired Sequence, a telehealth company focused on treating and supporting people living with obesity, and have recently launched that as WeightWatchers Clinic, but have really expanded our portfolio of offerings to continue to offer the behavior change we have for those living with overweight, but also to now have offerings really in the much like healthcare space, right? Real healthcare for people living with chronic conditions like obesity.
I think where you guys are really, what I've noticed or where you're standing out right now is that obesity is a chronic condition. To your point, how do we get ahead of that and not treat it after the fact? Are you tipping your hat a little bit to Wegovy and I guess semaglutide? You guys have definitely shifted more into that space. And is your telehealth practice folded into WeightWatchers, or is that going to run separately? What's happening there?
Yeah, so we acquired Sequence, I said, but it's fully now folded in. We've launched that as WeightWatchers Clinic, and really, I guess if you haven't seen some headline about Wegovy or Ozempic or these medications, right, it's probably you're not reading any news stories. It's kind of wild, the kind of appetite in the media for this. And I think one thing to know, just as consumers, is there's a pretty mixed. The accuracy of what's been reporting is kind of all over the place, is what I say. But these are really breakthrough medications for weight health. It's the first time that you really consistently, kind of for people living with obesity, can achieve and maintain 10% of weight loss, which is that 10% is really important for the medical community. That's where you see massive change in outcomes related to cardiovascular disease, diabetes, living with obesity. So that's why there's so much excitement and energy from the medical community around these medications. But it's really, so it is about those medications, but really, really importantly, it's about combination therapy, which means these medications need to be paired with helpful decisions about nutrition, activity. It's critical. It's part of the FDA's recommendations. In your mind, put in the analogy of like someone who's living with depression. You would never say, just take a medication. You would always combine that combination therapy with behavior change therapy. Cardiovascular disease is the same. You would never just like take a medication and be like, eat whatever you want. Eat all the salt and red meat you want. No, it's always paired with advice of combination therapy of how you pair that medication with behavior change. So that's why it's such a natural fit for WeightWatchers in this digital health world, bringing our expertise of the behavior change to combine with these amazing advances in medications to treat people living with obesity.
For me, it sounds like the impact of COVID on your business, well, in the short term, it sounds really, meetings went away for the obvious reasons. It used to be 80% in real life, and now your app, which was a tool, has turned into very much the main driver and really put your business on its head. You guys are responding so positively to that. What are, as it relates to in real life versus using the tool and leading with that, what are some of the things that you're doing in the marketplace to bring that to life and address that?
Yeah, I mean, our goals when you think of going to market, kind of our brand and marketing goals are twofold. We're really trying to balance building this new credibility. This is a new, much more like in healthcare space. And so how do we build that credibility with people living with chronic conditions, with the medical community, build that trust. But at the same time, we're a 60-year-old heritage brand. So we got to do that in a way that we're reaching new audiences, we're more culturally relevant than we have been in the past. And then also, we have a really strong anti-goal, which can be complicated, which is making sure people understand that we're not abandoning our history of behavior change, nutrition and activity for people living with overweight. That is a huge benefit for many people for their health goals. This is an expansion into more. We're becoming a portfolio company, which is just like a very different way to go to market. The portfolio offerings that we have in the past, and learning a lot there.
What are you doing to, address policy, or, this really is a fundamental shift in healthcare. What's WeightWatchers doing to, think about policy and address that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting area in this space. WeightWatchers has done this in the past around like access to nutrition for people who don't have access to the fruits and vegetables they need for their health. But in this space now, where we're in these kind of the treatment of obesity clinically, we've really focused on partnering with nonprofits like the Obesity Action Coalition around TROA. So TROA is an act in Congress that's been actually there for 10 years, which is the Treat and Reduce Obesity Act. And it continues to not pass. And a lot of this has to do with stigma and misunderstanding about obesity as a chronic condition. So what that act would do is right now, the government classifies for Medicare and Medicaid obesity as or any treatment of obesity or weight-related, kind of like more weight-specific, as a vanity drug. So the same as like if you're losing your hair, they treat it like that. It's not considered to be something that's treating a chronic condition like diabetes. And the result of that law is why these breakthrough medications are typically not covered by a lot of insurances. So if you just step back, and this is a chronic condition, the medical community is very clear about that. And anyone, if you were talking about like medication and treatment for cardiovascular diabetes, the idea that it would be, you would say that's a vanity. That's a vanity condition. So, we don't need to cover that for your health. It's kind of wild, but it's a great example of why the kind of societal stigma around living with overweight obesity is infiltrates everywhere. People in government live in our society and influences how they think about law. So we're really focusing on trying to educate around the stigma around obesity as a chronic condition, and partners like the Obesity Action Coalition on how we can move that policy so people can access the treatment they need to be healthy.
Yeah, there's so much that goes with it, right? Weight loss and obesity was always tied to willpower. And, if you're obese, clearly you don't have the willpower to be healthy. And so I think changing that stigma in society is going to be really important. And especially as it relates to policy and being able to potentially bring the drug to more people that don't have access and can afford it or can't afford it. Can you talk a little bit more about the kind of heritage of the WeightWatchers program and teaching people along with taking the drug how, are you still talking about how to eat right, what to eat, and what meals to make? I think that's still a big
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's it's why we think we have a unique opportunity to create value in this space. So, we actually created the first of its kind specific program, a nutrition activity program for people living on this medication. So we have our classic points program for people living with overweight, and then this program is specifically we call it the GLP-1 program. GLP-1 is the class of medications we're talking about. So the GLP-1 program is specifically designed for people on a journey with these medications. It's really it's very different. For those people, they need to focus on, are they getting enough nutrition? Because your appetite really changes. It reduces the food noise in your brain, and it's really kind of life-changing for people living with obesity. But they need to focus on, are you getting all your macronutrients? Are you getting enough protein and exercising? Because when you lose weight mass or fat mass, you also lose muscle mass. And it's really important to make sure you're not losing those in equal amounts for your overall health. So again, the FDA recommended it's critical that you learn how to match the right healthful behaviors with the medications.
I think you guys have always had, right, a scientific board, but here at CES, it sounds like you have, some medical practitioners here that are also part of your board. I mean, that's a huge shift in your business, right? It's like here's this mindset, eat this many points, and you're off. But tell us a little bit about your business change with the medical board practice coming into it.
Yeah, so with this change, we've always had a chief scientific officer and a team that have focused on clinical studies for the efficacy of our behavior change program, but we now have a chief medical officer, a medical director, a medical advisory board to make sure that we are really understanding the kind of medical and clinical side of the space we're moving into. Not only, I think we've been talking about like how we're going to market as a product, but also the marketing side. That's a really different motion to go to market in this more healthcare space, and how do we talked about the balance of creating credibility but being culturally relevant. So how do you bring that medical perspective into how we go to market and connect with consumers in a way that's interesting and fun and educational? So one example was last week we did a hype house with a bunch of influencers who are living on these medications. So a hype house, a lot of marketers in the room, like, yes, we have to explain that. You bring a bunch of content creators together in one space. They create content together, it massively amplifies that content, so they all have a bunch of followers, we have 15 together. Influencers who have been on this journey of these medications, they're all WeightWatchers clinic, using our GLP-1 program. So it was had that hype house kind of fun influencer vibe. At the same time, we had our medical director there and our head of nutrition, and it was really focused on almost like a shared medical appointment vibe of helping them learn on their journey and bringing that sense of, which is a part of our heritage of community, that people on a health journey together and sharing their insights in the context of experts who can help them is really powerful. And out of that, we've seen like 200 plus pieces of content, over 4 million impressions so far, and it's so much more meaningful than an ad about this to see someone who's talked. Like people are crying at the end of it, just being like, I feel so seen to be with people who are in this experience with me, and to talk to a doctor who validates this experience and helps me. It was kind of beat our expectations, not only from the marketing perspective, but just that sense of being seen as someone on their health journey and how impactful that can be.
You must feel really proud to be doing what you're doing and what WeightWatchers is doing, which is truly a complete shift. I mean, when you think about 60-year-old company, it's a true fundamental shift. Talked a lot about the science aspects, why at CES. You tipped your hat a little bit to being more of a product-led company versus just a marketing company. Clearly, we're sitting here with, I'm sure, a lot of marketers. Talk a little bit more about how you as the CMO productize this and brought it to market versus how did you shift your thinking and shift the thinking of the company from being marketing to product-led?
Yeah, I mean, that was another example, something that it's the only way I've known how to go to market. So it's a little bit just like bringing the team along with me and coming from startups. That it's product is the central hub, right? It's like, what are you building that is going to create impact, that's going to create change and for the members, and then how do you marketing amplify that? So focusing on features, outcomes. But it was a big switch. It was a different dynamic from the WeightWatchers business had grown up more as kind of a retail company in a lot of ways, where the motion to market is really different. So it's kind of been just bringing them along with how I naturally go to market. And then I think the biggest change of us for this January, our peak season, is this January. I'm sure you're shocked to learn that with New Year's resolutions, but going to market as a portfolio company is really different than a single product company. So we're still on that learning journey of, right, how do we talk about what's new and interesting? But again, really the anti-goal is people, which we hear a lot of the knee-jerk reaction, I'd say, from the more critical audience is, well, why are you abandoning behavior change? Why are you abandoning your history of what you believed in? And it's a much more complicated message to get out there that, that still exists. There's new stuff. And by the way, that new stuff is really important to be connected to the behavior change. And it's a lot of repetition and like thinking of meeting audiences where they are and not just talking to people. Again, the hype house is an example. And also going to market at that education level is really interesting with so much stigma around these medications and obesity. So doing that in a way that's fun and interesting so people can engage. We did launch a WeightWatchers clinic. We did a true serum coffee cart in locations where people could come, right? People love free coffee, so they're going to come. But that's where you can order the stigmachino, the macchiato, and that was all about like how do we get people, if you just tell, you can't just go to people and be like, hey, you're biased. Like, you're wrong about these medications. No one wants to have that conversation. But how can we create fun, entertaining, engaging experiences that likely say, hey, maybe you rethink this, relook at this. Here's some information. Here's a doctor you can talk to about why obesity is a chronic condition and deserves to be treated as one, the same way we would treat and talk about cardiovascular disease. So there's a lot of new learnings and experiences we're trying to create, and we're going to learn along the way.
So also from a marketing perspective, can you share with us how you're measuring now these outcomes, right? Because you are perhaps measuring signups and sales of products. Sounds like, I don't know if you can share, but how are you measuring success and the outcomes of it all?
Yeah, I mean, well, don't get me wrong, my CEO still holds me accountable for revenue and signups. So still really focused on CLTV CAC and performance of the overall marketing budget. But in this space, right, it's a lot of sentiment and mentality shifts. So we're looking at not just impressions, but a lot of like, what's the conversation? If we're doing things in like the House, like what's the conversation in the posts? Like, are we seeing people rethinking their perspective? Are we seeing people like the way it's going to change is not us saying things, but we're creating spaces where someone who's really skeptical and has stigma and bias is having a conversation with someone who's like living on these medications and saying, hey, you're talking to a person here. This is my experience. This is why it feels different to me, and that's what we're seeing. And so we're really looking at sentiment and engagement. We're shifting that for that top of funnel shift of perception. And that's what's going to open, that's what the opportunity for really impacting consumer health is at that education level. If you think about it, in order to be treated as someone living with obesity, you have to say, I am someone living with obesity. And our whole society's message is like, don't think that about yourself, because that means you have no willpower, there's something wrong with you. You should feel shame about that. What a horrible thing for people who are living with a chronic condition to not even feel like they can accept that, to then seek treatment. That's the biggest barrier to treatment right now, even more than policy in my opinion, is the way we have the stigma and shame around it, so that people don't even think that they deserve treatment.
Yeah, the way society thinks on the whole. All right, my last question for you before we open up to Q&A, but as you continue to grow the brand and innovate, I know you're headed out onto the floor today for a little semi-private tour, and maybe your answer will be different after that tour, but what's the one thing around innovation that you want the audience to know about WeightWatchers?
Yeah, and my head of innovation is actually here today. She's going to give me the tour. She gave me the highlights for all the things we're excited about. We got to find the stethoscope. For sure. But I think the thing I want, where we're thinking of innovating is really at the level of category creation. Like that's what's happening right now in digital health, and we want to be the pioneer of weight health as a new category. That in 10 years will be like weight health care. It's the same as heart health care, mental health care. It's a landscape of how we think of that as a category, and we want to pioneer that. But our hope in doing that is there's so much innovation that will happen outside of our walls that will impact the real health outcomes of people living with obesity and weight-related diseases, and kind of change the trajectory of health in this country and around the globe. Like it's incredibly exciting, and we're kind of living at the front of that wave, which is both thrilling and terrifying. But our hope is that we inspire, thinking like this, going back, I guess, circling back to the beginning of this, we inspire incredible innovation and startups to like start thinking of this space as a space to focus on and innovate in.
It's thrilling and terrifying, as I think, from a marketing perspective. But you have to deliver those results to your CEOs.
For sure.
So there you have it, people. I mean, a whole new sector at CES. You heard it here first. All right, so we want to open up to any questions from the audience.
Jill, excuse me. I'm sorry, I'm Rick Lucas. I'm the head of wellness at Snap, and GLP-1 absolutely blowing up. There's brands coming out of the woodwork with their GLP-1 brands. A lot of those brands are offering the opposite of what you're talking about. They're saying you can do this and you don't got to do nothing else. Just take it, you're good. Are you doing anything specifically to counter that, or the people that are interested in that, those aren't your people you don't even want to talk to?
Yeah, I mean, the medications on their own are still, like, we would never want to stop someone from what they want to do, right? That's still like a great option. Like, that's an option for people to follow. It's really that, like, to get the full benefit is doing it in combination therapy. And that's what the FDA recommends. So I think that's where the education comes in and saying, I guess where we're countering that or educating is our education messaging around our GLP-1 program, again, which is the Pure Nutrition and Activity Program. You can, if you're a WeightWatchers clinic, you get that automatically, right? We're supporting you clinically on the medication and care team. But also, you can, if you're getting your medications from your doctor or wherever you're getting them, you can just join WeightWatchers membership and have access to the GLP-1 program. So we're trying to make sure people understand that there's an easy way, like there's an easy way to get that care as a part of it. So right now, I don't think people, it's not so much a trade-off as much as if you're getting your medications from your PCP or another doctor, there's a wide variance in how much surround sound care you're going to get with that. And so we want them to understand there's options. If you're not getting kind of like supportive care on that nutrition, activity, and long-term care as a part of it, that there's another solution for you out there in the market. And so I think it's definitely an education journey. The other place I'd say is press, kind of like alluded to this, but we're really trying to make sure the press is reporting this responsibly, because a lot of the headlines are so just like attention grabbing and like only about the medication. And we're doing a lot to try to, not just on our own, but partnering with like the Obesity Action Coalition to make sure we're trying to get the right message out there for people reading about this, that you really should be doing this with like the nutrition and activity support, whether it's with your doctor, it's with WeightWatchers, whoever, but like that's the way you're really going to get the full health benefit.
Who doesn't want, right, to have some assistance, but we still need to keep helping.
Yeah.
And for the long-term benefit.
Any other questions? Any questions? Over there.
Hi there. Hi, Amanda. Sam from Triptych. Thanks very much for the panel. It's great to hear you talk about the shift in the conversation, moving away from the sort of the era of, it's about self-responsibility and willpower, because we know there's many more factors that go into shaping weight health outcomes. And obviously, Triptych and WeightWatchers is working on eliminating all the stigma around food noise at the cultural level. I'm really curious about your perspective on the other part of the equation, which is the food system itself, and the commercialization of mass nutrition and super processed foods, and where WeightWatchers in its sort of next chapter is going to push and play when it comes to sort of addressing some of those challenges.
Yeah, well, start at the highest level, just like kind of something very interesting. And in this space, as you've seen, there's a lot of the businesses that are associated with this kind of weight health space are kind of seeing the light segment, their stocks are growing. Separately, I don't know if you all listen to earnings calls, probably not, but if you listen to earnings calls like CPG companies, like that, what the conversations they're getting from investors is like, what are you going to do, when these are kind of a big, like this treatment is available more widely, right? Like it's available by insurance, like these are eventually going to be pills and not shots. And they're going to, it's more, yes, what WeightWatchers do, but I think more interestingly, it's the first real pressure from like a market and investor perspective on these companies. It's about like, oh, this is going to hit your bottom line, not today, but someday, and therefore you need to innovate in a way that is about, like, in a world where you're supporting, it's more about like, how are you getting the right protein? How are you getting the right macro nutrients in your diet? And it's just fascinating to learn from these, like, people are starting to think about that in the innovation pipeline of these big companies. And, one thing we're exploring is there are like partnership opportunities in terms of, co-branding, right? Of like, is this like, the snacks that are right to eat when you're on a weight health journey with medication, that like, we're exploring that idea. But I think what's more interesting to me is I think there's real, just like that pressure, out of pressure comes the biggest innovation, and they expect that it's the first time that kind of food industrial complex is feeling something from investors, being like, you're going to have to figure this out.
And it makes sense. If you've been coming to CES for many years, you would know there's been a major shift in who attends. It used to be very much tech companies, very traditional tech companies, and what was Apple going to release, or not Apple, but what is any one product going to release? And now it's very much about, there's a ton of CPGs here, and I remember when we saw that shift happen probably around 10 years ago. So many people would be like, why are these CPGs here, and this is really part of it. How are they going to shift and start to think about our culture and their responsibility really to that?
Well, guys, thank you so much. It's a great day.
Thank you.